So today's tutorial isn't really a tutorial. It's just a video of a little watercolor that I did in honor of Autism Awareness Day. Since the world is lighting it up with blue, and I have several dear friends who have children with autism, I thought that I would just film myself watercoloring. So I'm starting with an image that I bought from my friend Holly. It's one that I've been looking for a very long time. It's called Stipple Rose. It's an old Stampin' Up! Set that I've just been hankering for forever. And she was kind enough to sell it to me. She's doing a crafty purge like I was doing. And she posted about it, and I said, hey, do you happen to have this set? And she did, and was so sweet. Bundled it up with a beautiful card and sent it off to me. So I thought I would use that for today's blue project. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking out pigment powders from my Brusho powdered watercolor set. This is honestly one of my favorite watercolor mediums. I don't have a favorite. They're like my children. But like children, come on, you know that you like some of them better than you like others. So I do like this one better than some others, and you'll see why. As you know, I like very saturated colors, and these pigments are incredibly saturated. I took a drinking straw and I cut it at an angle. This is a little tip I learned from Fred Mullet. And that's what I scoop out the pigment powders with. It makes a great little scoop. And it gives you not too much of the powder. As I said, these are very saturated, so a little bit goes a long way. The amount that I'm putting out here today, I'll be able to use for a long, long time. I'll just let it dry in the palette, and I'll be able to use it again. I'm using basically all of the blues that I got in my starter set. And I use different blues for different shading. And over on the left, the one that looks orange is actually leaf green. It's kind of magical how they look after you get them wet. Now to stamp the image, I'm using Stampin' Up! Tempting Turquoise ink pad. I'm just using the ink as a guide, and so I needed a dye-based water-soluble ink in a similar color family. So it's basically going to be like no-line watercolor. Now on the right-hand side, you'll see this very funky, cool ashtray that I'm using for a brush holder and a water well. My friend Stephanie, I think, is the one who posted that vintage ashtrays make great watercolor tools, and she is correct. And I love this one. It's robin's egg blue on the outside and orange on the inside, so it fits my room perfectly. Now I'm using an eyedropper just to add a little bit of water to these powdered pigments. And you can see some of the colors sort of light up as I add a little bit of water. And there you can see the magic of the orange turning into green. That is just something else. I love it. And now that I have them all saturated, I'm going to go ahead and pull some pigments out. Now you'll see when I put the brush back into the water how heavy and dense those pigments are. You can see they settle right to the bottom, and they are extremely, extremely vivid, and I love them so much. The one that you see me pulling out here, look how much pigment's coming off my brush. It's just called turquoise. It's my favorite blue in the set. It's usually the blue that I start with, and it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous transparent color. And this is going to be my base color. I like to put the stamp near me just for reference. I like to see where the shading was on the original because I'm basically going to obliterate the stamp details with the watercolor since it is a water-based ink. And since I had gone on a walk and my baseball cap is getting in the way, yes, that's how glamorous I am right now. I will zoom in just a touch. Now you can see that at the first pass, I'm just I'm not being even remotely realistic here. I'm just putting down both some lighter color and some darker color just to serve me as a guide later on. I put this in big blocks just so that I know where some of the shading is as some of the details start to get lost. I'm using one of the medical washcloths that I really love in my craft room. I will link those for you. They're a very durable, much more durable than a paper towel. For watercoloring, I can use them over and over again. And I use that both to blot and to sort of dry my brush on when I get just a little bit too much water. Now as I move to the top flower, you can see I'm being a little bit more careful about preserving the detail than I was on the large one. On these larger images, it's easy for me to be just a little bit more abstract. But on the smaller one, I kind of needed to preserve some of the natural shadows. And so I was a little bit more precise as I did that one. I'm keeping the larger flower pretty wet and pretty loose just to cover that big space with. So now you can see the leaf green, and I just think it's magic how that pigment is orange in its powdered form and how it is a beautiful springy green when you get it wet. A lot of the colors in this set have that kind of opposite property. It's pretty neat. Now I use several different brushes sort of randomly. There's not really much of a technique here. I like the similar shaped brushes, as you can see. I have a number 4 here, I think. I have 2 of Claudine Helmuth's brushes from an online class that I took with her. And I'm going into the leaves actually with one of the darker blue violets and adding some shading to the leaves. Even though it's a complementary color, it really adds nice shadows. And then I add some of the deeper cobalt blues from the set as shading, and that starts to really make that turquoise blue pop a little bit. And then I just want to make sure I have all the foliage covered, and then I have something that looks like a shadow on the correct side of these leaves, even though again I'm not really going for realism here, I'm going for pops of color. It's really too bad that there aren't flowers that look like this in real life. I would have a yard full of them, believe me. Now occasionally I will hit it with my heat gun. These transparent colors layer so beautifully that I can actually bring back a lot of detail, as I'm doing here with the darker color, if I dry the layers in between. If I don't dry them in between, the color just pools and sort of does what it wants to do, which sometimes I really want. Sometimes that's on purpose. But this time I need a little bit more contrast, and so I am drying it. Now I'm adding a little bit of white pigment and also some yellow to work on the background with. This is a beautiful yellow. It reminds me of Summer Sun ink because it has sort of an orange tone to it, just a warm sunny yellow. And as you can see, a teeny tiny bit of pigment goes a long way. The other thing that I really like about these watercolors is you can see here I'm putting down some pretty dark, intense pigment, but it blends out like nobody's business. Even if it's dry, I can come in and soften the edges of an area that I've already watercolored. And it's one of the things that I really like because it is very forgiving, and I am not a watercolor artist by any stretch. So I need mediums that allow me to make mistakes and then fix them. Some watercolors do grab pretty well to the paper, and you're not able to move them quite as much. This medium is not one of those, and I like it. I think it would be a great beginning watercolor, actually, for that reason. So I'm going back and just adding some more darker yellow pigment. Just same color, just more of it, just to add a little bit of contrast. It almost gets an orange look when I'm done. Now I've added some water to the white pigment. As you can see, I got a couple crystals of blue in there, which is fine, because actually what I'm going for is just a lighter blue. But I needed some opacity to add some highlights to the rose. Now in traditional watercolor, this is really cheating. You're supposed to allow the white of the page to be your white. And so I'm cheating, and if anybody has a problem with that, that's just too bad, because I'm doing what I'm doing. So I'm adding just some of the little curves of the petals back in based on, again, I'm just looking up at the stamp image and trying to recreate the detail that I eliminated with the watercolor. I find this extremely helpful because the artist who designed the stamp has already done a good job of showing you where the lights and darks should be. Now, speaking of darks, what I just did was I stopped and I took a picture of the image with my iPhone, and I switched it to black and white, and that helped me see that I needed a lot more contrast on the flowers. And this is a trick I use a lot. So I really recommend looking at your images in black and white to show you that you need more shadow, which you almost always do. We never put enough shadow on our images, or enough deep dark shadow. We tend to go a little bit light as card makers. Now I'm coming in and just adding some detail to the leaves and to this little bud with a darker blue, just to finish the image off. And I hope that you've enjoyed that. Thanks for watching.